Spoštovana predsednica, spoštovani predsednik.
Distinguished presidents, dear members of the delegations, dear representatives of the media, welcome to the press statement following today's meeting of the presidents of the neighboring countries. 20 years ago, we hosted the presidents of neighboring countries for the first time to celebrate 20 years of Slovenia's independence. Today, we are hosting the presidents of neighboring countries to celebrate 20 years of Slovenia's EU membership. The following order of statements. First of all, the host, the President of the Republic of Slovenia, Her Excellency Dr. Nataša Pirc Musar, then the President of the Italian Republic, His Excellency Sergio Mattarella, then the President of the Republic, His Excellency Van der Bellen, and then the President of the Republic of Croatia, Zoran Milanovic, and President of the Republic of Hungary, Tamás Suljo. Each president will receive one question, first Italian, then Austrian, and so on. Thank you very much, Nate. First of all, thank you to the media for turning up in such great numbers. This means a lot to me personally and to my homeland, so that you have also come here to celebrate 20th anniversary of Slovenia's EU membership, and a special great word of gratitude to the 4 presidents that have accepted my invitation to attend this celebratory meeting and to share with me and now with you their views of the European Union. So first of all, allow me a few words about how I, and I hope that also Slovenians, see the European Union 20 years after joining it. Our region is a region that unites nations that used to be on opposing sides. Today, we live in harmony. Our region stands at the crossroads of Germanic, Romance, Hungarian and Slavic cultural influences. Today, we are building the European Union based on diversity. Our region is characterized by an Alpine, Mediterranean and Pannonian mindset. Today, we are building a strong and competitive EU based on understanding. Our region of countries with different histories, languages and cultures can be a role model for the countries of the Western Balkans in terms of the power of cooperation and respect for diversity, that is. The European Union is united in peace and open to all countries that share our values, such as peaceful coexistence, respect for the rule of law, and above all, human rights. The euro is the common currency of the EU, but the true currency of the EU is the acceptance of diversity. This message is all the more important at a time of rising populisms that feed on hatred towards others. Excellent relations between neighbors are also a cornerstone of the European Union. We have developed rich and friendly relations with our neighboring countries, and the presidents gathered here have played an important role in this. Minorities that are a bridge between countries is what we also have in common with all the 4 countries. We also share common projects. 20 years ago, Slovenia celebrated becoming a member of the EU at a ceremony at the border between Gorizia and Nova Gorica. Next year, when we commemorate the end of the war, this will also be the place where we will inaugurate the European capital of culture, Gorizia, Nova Gorica. The project undoubtedly symbolizes openness and integration, as well as celebrates diversity. Our region is also connected by solidarity. A solidarity that Slovenia experienced most recently last year when it was affected by floods, and its neighbors were among the first to provide aid. They were among the first to help Slovenia. As you know, they helped us build many bridges, proper bridges, and thus they also helped us strengthen the bridges between countries, the bridges of friendships, and Now, reflections on 20 years in the EU. Slovenia joined the European Union 20 years ago. At the time of accession, Slovenia was, in terms of development, at 72% of the EU average, and today it is at 92%. The advantages of membership are manifold, from strengthening democracy to consolidating Slovenia's role in the world. Our GDP has increased by more than a half in these 20 years. Our biggest economic partners are our neighbors, Italy, Austria and Croatia, Hungary, alongside, of course, Germany and France as our main economic partners. Tourists who fly to Vienna, visit Austrian towns and cities, drive to Budapest, return via Bled and travel on to Venice and Florence. Then they can marvel at Split and Dubrovnik. Thus, they can experience all the mighty history, cultural heritage and beauty of our lands in such a small geographical area. One of the EU's key assets is the four freedoms. I am a steadfast supporter of the fully functioning Schengen regime, and I would like to take this opportunity to call on all the governments of the neighboring countries and the Slovenian government to abolish internal border controls. Schengen is one of the great accomplishments of the European Union, and open borders are one of the most precious advantages in a region that previously knew walls. And now about our strategic challenges. The EU is today faced with geopolitical and structural challenges. A war is raging on Europe's borders in Ukraine. There are complications in relations between Israel and Iran. We are helpless when we are watching the severe human crisis in Gaza and also in Sudan. Slovenia, as a member of the UN Security Council, will continue to work tirelessly to find a path towards a lasting and just peace in Ukraine, as well as to protect civilians in Gaza and elsewhere around the world. There are also challenges of migration, and in this framework I welcome the recently adopted Pact on Migration and Asylum, as well as the good cooperation between the police forces of neighboring countries in border protection. We have talked about some of these challenges also today. So how to make our EU even stronger, more competitive and more social. And now about the importance of enlargement. The EU's strength lies not only in its current members, but also in its potential for growth. Enlargement is one of the most powerful geopolitical tools, and embracing European values has a tremendous transformative power. The presidents gathered here represent the countries that support EU membership of the Western Balkan countries. Slovenia will continue to assist the countries of the region, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, on their European path, both with expertise and politically. And now let me conclude with a few words about our planning, because today meeting coincides with Earth Day. Our countries are renowned for their natural beauty, which we must protect and preserve. I have therefore decided to give all the presidents a present, a linden tree sapling to plant in their countries. The linden tree is one of Slovenia's national symbols. May this symbolic gesture represent the friendship between neighboring nations and reaffirm our common commitment to combating climate change. I would like to thank once again Presidents Mattarella, van der Bellen, Milanovic and Šuljok for marking the 20th anniversary of Slovenia's EU membership. Your presence today is a powerful testimony of the ties that unite us and to the spirit of cooperation that will drive us forward. May our friendship and our linden trees continue to grow also in the future and remind us of today. They will definitely remind me till the end of my life. Thank you. President Mattarella, the floor is yours.
I wish to thank very much President Musar for having invited us today for this very important celebration of the 20th anniversary of Slovenia in the European Union. This is an invitation that, of course, we are grateful for, and it allows us to underscore the importance of that event, not only for Slovenia, but for all of the European Union. On that May 1st of 20 years ago, more countries joined the Union. It was one of the largest enlargements ever known to the European Union, from 25 states that had been engaged in establishing common principles of democracy, the respect for human rights and the rule of law. And it is through those principles that after World War II there came the idea of integration for the continent. And therefore they conceived the Union, which was then born as a community of values. Of course, the Atlantic Alliance had existed in order to defend what was called at the time the free world and democracy and freedom to enjoy rights. So the European Union as a community of values, not simply a framework for useful, of course, economic cooperation. And the accession of Slovenia in the European Union was an example of a great success. And in fact, in the space of time of one generation, Slovenia managed to reach and therefore achieve the parameters for Schengen and the Eurozone in 3 years, in fact. And for the first time, it took over the presidency of the European Union, and it is now on the Security Council of the United Nations. For the Italian Republic, this event of 20 years ago was indeed very important, not only because it was a country that had participated in the birth of the European Union in 1957, but because it was a neighboring country, a bordering country, which of course directly experienced that event with great emotion, because it was a way of showing how important the future of two peoples it was, the Italian people and the Slovenian people. I remember that ceremony. I remember on the 30th of April in 2004, when the president of the European Commission at the time, Romano Prodi, in Gorizia, Nova Gorica, took down that symbol, that last symbol of a border, which was a line of separation between two cities. And in fact, they will soon become the capitals of culture together, as President Pirc Musar just reminded us. So that was how the European Union showed that it was wise and courageous, because in addition to the enlargement process of 2004, it was also fostering and promoting a convention, an agreement that was in fact based on the building up of a union, which was then disregarded because of the opposition of some countries. However, what I wish to say today is that because of the events which are unfolding, we need the same kind of constructive spirit that we saw at the time. We are facing challenges and threats, and we have to acknowledge this. There are some countries that are contributing today to the life of the Union, and they are living along the borders of this terrible war that was unleashed by Russia against Ukraine in violation of all rules of international law. These are countries that live along the borders of this war, and their conditions would have been entirely different had they been members of the Union. And this is how important it is. This is why it is so important to make choices at the right time, in a timely fashion, because, of course, history teaches us that there are people who have to pay a high price for decisions that were not made in a timely fashion. That's why we are celebrating such an important moment which took place 20 years ago. Slovenia and other 9 countries that entered the Union, but also for all of the countries of the Union. We must realize how urgent it is for us. to contribute to consolidation of peace. And therefore, to do this, we need to complete the European project. Today, more than ever, it is essential, first of all, for the Western Balkans. These are countries that have been waiting for 20 years now, and we can no longer wait for them to accede. And of course, we also have Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. The European Union is a way for us to progress together. There are many different ways. I think we can take two as symbols, Schengen, the Schengen Agreement, and the Erasmus program. These are two ways of showing how important it is to underscore and to uphold European citizenship. And in fact, President Pirc Musar just mentioned, and I agree with her, on the full implementation of Schengen. In just a few weeks' time, 400 million European citizens will be asked to vote in order to elect their new parliament. It will be an excellent exercise of democracy. And hopefully there will be an exceptional turnout for that vote, because this is how citizens can be the protagonists of the future of the continent and the union that they are part of. It will then be up to the European institutions and European governments to do what they can in order to ensure that the union is also a main player in the international community. This is an important contribution that we must make, in other words, for peace and stability. We cannot be in a condition where Europe and all its member states are often simply spectators and observers of what is happening in the international community. Often we are witnessing events that we then have to suffer from. We have to suffer the consequences of those events. And this is why we must be very courageous. Following the elections of the new European Parliament, we must show how courageous, in fact, we are in dealing with these issues. I wish to thank once again President Pirc Musar and to underscore how successful Slovenia has been in the European Union, and this contributes to strengthening our commitments and engagement in the future of the European Union. And I wish to thank the President for having invited neighbouring countries on this very important celebration, which is very prestigious for Slovenia. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President.
President van der Bellen, the floor is yours.
Musar, liebe Nataša, Excellenzen. Dear Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen, if you can remember 2004, actually Facebook has been founded then. The Ukraine has won for the first time the Eurovision Song Contest. I cannot remember Ruslana, but maybe some of you can. But on the 1st of May 2004, the European Union has got 10 new member states. It was enlarged by 10 states. 20 years ago, some commentators thought that this enlargement wouldn't work out, that these countries would had a hard time to pacing up, that the Union would pay a high price for it. Now we know better. We can only have a look on my country, Austria. Austria has benefited a lot from the enlargement. The European exports to the new EU member states have, in the time span of 20 years, have tripled. And similar is the account for the direct investments. The EU enlargement brought us in Austria additional economic impetus, and also of course 20 billion euros and 30,000 additional jobs in Austria. These advantages, these positive advantages can be seen on both sides. I don't want to bear you with figures, but a fact is the division into old and new members of the EU is actually obsolete. And it is a very impetus that it is obsolete, and 2022, this is the statistics. So It is for Slovenia, for Czechia, Lithuania, Estonia are more, we could say, have a greater GDP as Portugal or other, as measured by the GDP per capita. Austria has joined the EU in 1995, and we have paved a new era within our history. It is a chapter where the main part was to be part of a club, to have strengths combined, to have compromises set, and to search for solutions at the negotiating tables. In light of the all circumstances today, membership in the European today means to be part of a value-based and strategical projects, to be part of a project which is striving to see the big picture, to see peace, democracy, rule of law, to see freedom on the European continent and to preserve it. This is also the reason why the European Union is standing firmly behind Ukraine. Since the beginning of the aggression war on Ukraine, we have made historic decisions in the EU, so the regulation to start accession negotiations with Ukraine, with Bosnia and Herzegovina, also with Moldova before. And Austria is in favor of these decisions. We have a strategic interest, which is clear, to have a further enlargement of the EU, which is especially valid for the states of the Western Balkans. The West Balkan countries are our inner neighbors, and this is not only, but also it is within our security interest to have them on board, and we have to go this path, and I am personally convinced this is the right path. Also, we have to have that we, the European Union, we have to make our own work at home, to make the homework, so to think how we have to prepare for the enlargement, how the EU of the 30 or 35 members can actually be put into existence. This is a clear work for us current member states. We have to think about it. I wish we would have a confidence and a very firm Europe, which is not only economically having its interests, but also having political interests. As a closing, I would like to thank our esteemed colleague, friend, Nataša Pirc Musar, for her initiative for this common meeting for us to have this 20 jubilee of the succession. And also I would like to thank you for your splendid hospitality. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Spoštovani predsednik Milanović, izvolite.
President Milanović.
Distinguished President, dear Nataša, Your Excellencies, other presidents, it is a very great honor to be among those people and representatives of nations with whom Croatia has such great relations. And we have to thank you for our participation and joining of the European Union. 20 years ago, I just finished being a diplomat. I remember Romano Prodi being in Gorizia, and I remember that I was not jealous at all to Slovenia for joining first, because I believed that Croatia will follow this way much sooner. However, it took us 9 years to joined the European Union. It was not just about meeting the criteria, but also about the politics. And it is the fact that countries like Albania have not opened any negotiations chapter at all. This includes the Northern Macedonia, then Montenegro, Serbia, which needs to decide where it belongs politically and systematically. But all these countries taken together, their nominal GDP
okay, this is a questionable criteria. The combined GDP is lower than that of Slovenia and Croatia together. On the other hand, this is not such a big headache for somebody who would like to find a solution. However, there are forces who are against such a solution. I understand that the relations between Slovenia and Croatia are excellent, have been so in the recent years, and I cannot speak about everybody in the European Union, but I would say that most of the people believe that this is a good union to be with, that this is an okay union. Croatia, however, has not taken advantage of all the benefits available so far. We will have to do so in the near future, otherwise we will become a net contributor very soon. But somebody mentioned Portugal, who at some point became a bit still. I see Croatia still as very dynamic. The European Union is a unique area of same values, but it is not a uniform area. But if we look at from all points of view, this is old nations that have become then states, and this is something which has been in place for a very long time. So when there are those who say that the European Union should speak with one voice, we have to define which voice would that be, from which head this voice would come out, and why. I think this is not realistic. At some point we have to define what is enough, because the mantra of ever closer union is at the end pushed out the British democracy, which was the oldest, is the oldest so far. So we have to find a middle way of rationality, balance between a dogmatic views and extremely skeptical views. Okay, skepticism in itself is acceptable, but not extreme skepsis. So we have to find a middle way to find things which are acceptable to all of us, to involve those around us. I have in mind especially former Yugoslavia and other Western European Western Balkan countries. But not all are European countries, and we cannot combine everybody because we are not United States of America, and it is good that we are not. So this middle rational way is the basis for our future. I believe with our single market or internal market, whatever term you want, we are happy how it is functioning. This is good for Croatia, and it brings other opportunities. The area of free movement and human rights, this is something which developed from 1951 to 1967 and so on. Some things which are quite acceptable now were very controversial 50 years ago. Now the changes are taking place. Young generations are accepting some values which are quite difficult to be accepted in other parts of the world. Whoever wants to change people, and this is a process where all of us are influencing people and trying to change them. And in this process, we should not go too far and forget about it. This is not populism. This is a finding a rational way between dogma and total skepsis. So we should avoid any conflicts. Thankfully, this society is a good and healthy society, and hope it will stay that way.
Distinguished Madam President, distinguished presidents, esteemed members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's been 20 years ago, on the 1st of May 2004, that together with Slovenia and a host of other countries, Hungary also joined the European Union, and we are now celebrating together with the Slovenian, the Italian, the Austrian, and the Croatian heads of state. I'd like to cordially express my gratitude, Madam President, for the invitation, for the very cordial hospitality we have been giving. United in diversity. This is the basic motto of the European community, and Hungary joined the European Union along the line of this. And it is this basic tenet that we respect and we intend and aspire to act accordingly. During the course of our discussion today, I have spoken about our position against the ever-increasing federalist approach in European politics. We believe that this integration that aims to be closer and closer and being forced on us is going to result in a weaker Europe. Hungary would not like to concede her sovereignty. We believe in a European alliance of independent nation states. Central Europe, and Hungary in it, is the engine of this region. We actually have our own independent vision, strategy, and solutions. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am concerned with the events of the past months in global politics. Conflicts in the world are threatening the lives of millions of people worldwide. I have emphasized during the course of our discussion that Hungary is actually now implementing the largest humanitarian mission of its history with respect to Ukraine. We stand for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and from the outset we have condemned the military aggression of Russia. We are dedicated to peace, and at every forum we endeavor to call the attention of the international community to refrain from any step that may lead to escalation or a protracted war. Hungary is going to do its utmost to ensure that the European Union or NATO do not become part of this conflict. We firmly condemn the terror attacks of Hamas and support the right of Israel to self-defense. The stability of the Middle East is a shared European interest, and the European Union has to play a role in settling this conflict as soon as possible. I have pointed out during the plenary session one of the most pressing issues of our contemporary times, climate change. The Carpathian Basin actually is one of the regions where warming is actually higher than average, and this is an important issue for Hungary. We consider it important that any climate policy measure taken should not be an added burden on people who are in a difficult financial situation anyway, nor should it be an extra burden on our businesses. This is what Hungary is working on. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Hungary's EU presidency is nearing. I have reiterated to the presidents today that my country is firmly committed to the enlargement of the European Union. We wish to allow as many accession talks to start and to open as possible. To show how important this topic is for us, the Hungarian EU presidency is going to organize an EU Western Balkans and European Community Summit in early November this year. Distinguished Madam President, distinguished presidents, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that the different opinions about Europe do not divide us, but bring us together. We believe that Europe's strength is in dialogue, and we Hungarians are open to all kinds of dialogue. As it is written in the Ode to Joy, thy magic binds again what custom strictly divided. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Hvala predsednici in predsedniku.
Thank you to the President and the Presidents for the statements. And now it's time for questions. So please, of all, state your name and your media. And first of all, the question for the Italian President, Mattarella.
Presidente, buongiorno ai capi di Stato. La mia domanda per il Presidente della Repubblica Italiana.
Good morning, President. You spoke a moment ago about reforms, the reforms that Europe needs and that it will have to deal with right after the coming elections. What are these immediate and urgent reforms that are so needed at the moment, in this difficult moment, considering the situation in the international community and in Europe?
Domanda interessante.
That's a very interesting question. And these are economic reforms that I'm referring to. Naturally, we have to increase the competitiveness of the Union, and we have to have more giant companies that are able to compete in the strategic sectors. And we also need other kinds of reforms, institutional in nature. Let me just point out three which I see as being key. The first has to do with the decision-making process of the European Union. In today's world, problems appear very swiftly and they require timely responses. And those who can provide an immediate response will, of course, guide the world in a certain direction. And the European Union is not able to do that. It needs a decision-making process that will allow it to make timely, effective decisions. Because, as I said, problems are not going to wait. Other people will solve those problems if we don't step in. And the European Union and its member states will be observers of the solutions devised by others. The second reform has to do with the Union's common defence policy. 25 years ago in Helsinki, it seemed to be within reach, and it must be on the agenda again. It is impossible to postpone it, considering the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It is not to be seen as an alternative to NATO, but contrarily, it is a way of strengthening the European pillar of the alliance. Today, it spends huge amounts of money, but there are reduced defence operating capabilities, and yet we need to have this common defence made stronger because it would increase capabilities ever more. The third reform has to do with the Union's financial system, which needs to be completed because it is a system which is incomplete and therefore it cannot hold up for a long time. It will just collapse, it will dissolve, and of course it will affect and impact the economies of member states.
And now a question for President van der Bellen.
Sehr verehrter, dear President, you have heard President Milanovic. Not all countries of the EU, of the West Balkans are EU. So do you share this opinion? That is your opinion also coordinated with the Austrian government? I do believe there is a consensus in between the federal government and myself as regards the enlargement of the EU and the Western Balkans. And of course, we are sharing the opinion, the accession negotiations with Ukraine, with Moldova. What was the third one? So we have consensus on that. I wouldn't see there would be any discrepancies. Anyway, we have to be striving strongly. We have to think about it. What is our homework of the current EU 27 in order to be able to have one day 30, 35 member states? In order to also be able to make decisions in the current form of decision-making, as my colleague Mr. Mattarella has stated, the longevity of making decisions. With this structure, I do believe we cannot continue with it. So, besides it, we do have put the right consequences that on the border of the European Union, we have war. So what is the common defense policy? What is the common foreign policy? We both know how it is hard to have common positions, to find them. So we don't have a lot of time to find these positions. So I see here we have to be very swift also for the current EU27 and, of course, more pressing if we have more than 30 members.
Hvala. Sledi vprašanje za spoštovanega.
And now the question for President Milanović. You mentioned the end of border crossing controls. Is there a political will in the executive to not continue with such controls? And have you found another possibility how to provide for security without suspending Schengen? And one more question. What will you do in the constituting the Croatian Sabor? Well, this first thing is not what you're interested at all in your question. However, I will comment. We are not making decisions here. I'm certainly in favor of open borders between Croatia and Slovenia and all other countries. But we know that Schengen is a very delicate system and it can collapse at any time. Slovenia reacted by closing the borders to a certain extent. I understand. I don't condemn it. But let's go back to default of Schengen. And this is free movement of people. There are no problems between Croatia and Slovenia. Actually, tens of thousands of Slovenes have property at the seaside on Croatia, and that is a kind of an organic bond. And the basis for friendship. There are really many good things that brings us together. One more thing which was mentioned here, and it's important that we do mention it here, decision-making changes, especially when it comes to defense. It's been on the table for 30 years. I started with that when I started European law. This has been on the table for a very long time and not much has changed. This is the basis of the system. And in Croatia, nobody would like this decision-making system to change. We would really like to preserve unanimity. This is the difference between us. This is the view of many people in Eastern and Central Europe. These are the criteria which we agreed on when we were accessing the European Union. But there is a problem in the European Union which is very inherent, so to speak. Everything is changing all the time. Everything is on the move. And there are no such things which you could say that they are temporarily permanent. We don't have an American federal system which would result in a tax which would be unchanged and interpreted differently over 250 years. But in Croatia, in the EU, we are over-engineering and over-changing all the time. And this means that it is very difficult for us to work and to concentrate on what we have in common. And that's a lot that there is in common. We will never reach perfection if we continue over-engineering, and we will be then over-designed. So if we have over-design, this would be like designing a weapon which would take not 5 days, but 5 months to make, and this will be very costly. Now, the question about the Croatian constitution, there is a 20-day
deadline, and before that there will not be a constitutive meeting of the Croatian Chamber. If earlier is needed, maybe earlier, but there are constitutional frameworks which I have to abide by. This is a constitution which cannot be changed just as such. It has been followed. The Croatian constitution was written 20 or 30 years ago. Most of their authors are living. I was among the authors of constitution in Croatia. I know that it is very simple and very concrete.
Hungarian President.
Ferenc Jó from the Hungarian Public Television. I'd like to ask you, Mr. President, what is your opinion about criticism coming from within the European Union concerning Hungary? Well, thank you very much. It's a good question. I believe that the European Union has been created to have a debate and to conduct a dialogue, and it's an important venue for dialogue. There is a substantial difference of opinion between certain member states and the European Union, and it is about the constitutional order of the member states and the European Union's order. The European Union treaties have certain values, basic principles and objectives which are not independent of member states, but they are actually rooted in the constitutional order of the member state. This is where they come from. And these fundamental values continue to have to serve as the basis for the whole integration, and Hungary also adheres to this 100%. However, in recent times, these shared values have been criticized or subjected to a biased opinion. Of course, for us to be able to maintain the integration in the future, we have to do away with inciting political conflict by citing these values, and we just have to go back to the roles and competences as they are set forth in the treaties. Thank you very much.
And a question for the Slovenian President. Please, go ahead. Seku Konde from RTV Slovenia. We have heard from various presidents what everything the European Union will have to tackle in the coming months and the coming years. However, this year is very important for the EU due to the elections, and we know the statistics about the increasing Euroscepticism and ideas that run against the EU. Then they are also fighting to enter the European Parliament, and in the context of what has been mentioned by President van der Bellen, Mattarella and Milanovic, how will the European elections influence and change the future direction of the EU? European elections are very important because the European Parliament is the only directly elected institution. Each country has a certain number of MEPs there, Slovenia 9, and I would really like to call on each and every one that has suffrage, especially young people, to go to the polls and cast their votes. We know about the low turnout at the elections in Slovenia. That was 29%, and I hope that we will be able to increase this number. I believe that Slovenian citizens are not well aware of the importance of the EU for them, young people can see how important Erasmus Plus is, or the roaming fees. So these are the practical benefits of the EU, but I'm concerned about how the election campaign will be conducted. An increase in populism is not good for the EU. I sincerely believe that the very foundation of the EU, the rule of law, that is not a political issue, whether you respect the law or not, has nothing to do with politics. So I sincerely wish that the European Parliament will be the one that will create the directions, the paths for which we are known around the world. Here I will especially refer to digitalization. Here the European Union is truly a global champion. Or when we talk about GDPR, and very soon the Act on AI will be adopted. We have already adopted the Act on Digital Services. So all these are things that can be a role model for people around the world. Disinformation is the poison of democracy nowadays. And only together, through discussion with a uniform vision, we can prevail. Slovenia is at the crossroads of information originating from the Western Balkans, where Russia generates a lot of disinformation. And of course, then from Slovenia, this then spills over to our member states, to our spheres of life. So once again, I would like to stress that it is important that the Western Balkan countries join our big family that has much more advantages than disadvantages, if you ask me. And I'm very pleased that the Brdo Brioni process continues. This is a very important hub for culture. Last year in North Macedonia, we really talked in a cultural manner, in a presidential manner. So now we are to meet in Montenegro, and I look forward to this meeting. And the 9th of June in Slovenia, let this be the day for democracy. Let us not only be Slovenian citizens of Slovenia, but also European citizens. Thank you very much. This concludes this press statement. Thank you for turning up in such great numbers, and thank you also to the President and the President of the Republic, and wish you a pleasant day.